Hi, listeners. This is a quick thank you for listening and for your ongoing support. If you're enjoying the program, please consider clicking the follow or subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It really helps us out. There's no better way to support us than doing that or sharing the show with a friend, colleague, family member, or any new or expecting parent in your life. It's totally appreciated. On with the show. Hi, I'm Sarah Trott, and welcome to the Fourth Trimester Podcast. I'm a new mama, and this podcast is all about postpartum care for the first few months following birth, the time period also known as the fourth trimester. My postpartum doula, Esther Gallagher, is my co-host. She's a mother, grandmother, perinatal educator, birth and postpartum care provider. Fourth trimester care, our topic, is about the practical, emotional, and social support parents and baby require. And importantly, it helps set the tone for the continuing journey of parenting. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Fourth Trimester Podcast. I'm Sarah Trott, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. We are talking about a very important topic and probably under-discussed, honestly. It's VBACs, so that's vaginal birth after cesarean, and cesarean recovery tips. So you might be planning a VBAC or recovering from a cesarean, or you just want to better understand this topic. There are so many cesareans happening in the United States, planned and unplanned, probably worthwhile just to have the education and knowledge if you are planning a pregnancy or if you are currently pregnant or helping support someone who is going through this experience, right? I know there's so many support people, friends and family members who will also benefit from this information. So here with me to discuss the topic is Petra Cruz. She's a certified doula and a birth educator, and she is the founder of Birthing Come True, and she has her own podcast. So we'll stick the link to her show in our show notes. It's very good, and I recommend you listen and subscribe and follow her everywhere. So Petra is passionate about empowering birthing people through informed decision-making, and she provides compassionate support, and she has an absolute wealth of knowledge on this topic. So welcome, Petra.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here chatting with you.
Yes. Yeah. So we met because we were both supporting different charities recently through Podcast-thon. I was supporting Postpartum International, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about the charity you're supporting and why you're so passionate about this topic.
Absolutely. So during that time, I was supporting ICAN, which if you haven't heard of ICAN, it's International Cesarean Awareness Network. And this is an incredible nonprofit who helps women who maybe are not sure about resources in their area for having a birth after cesarean, whether that's a vaginal birth after cesarean, or if you want a repeat cesarean, or if it's an unplanned repeat cesarean. So they are a wealth of knowledge, and they gather information to help you find a VBAC supportive hospital, figure out what your options are, and just help you in whatever way that they can. So I utilize them on my own journey, and they are just so incredible in helping you feel confident, educated, and empowered along that journey.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. No, I just really appreciate that you are spreading the word about this topic and helping support such a wonderful cause. So thank you. So tell us a little bit more about you, Petra. How would you introduce yourself in your own words?
Yeah. So I am obsessed with birth, all things birth. I actually had my first daughter when I was 16 years old, and I was wildly uneducated. I just thought birth was going to unfold and I would just give birth and my body would know what to do. And yeah, of course, our bodies know how to give birth. But when you're put inside of a hospital system that unfortunately have time constraints, have policies and regulations to follow, that just doesn't always happen. So I had my first cesarean and then actually went on to have 2 more cesareans after that. I was not educated. I didn't know my options. And then I went on to have a vaginal birth after those 3 cesareans. And so VBAC is so near and dear to my heart that now I have my own VBAC membership that I help women to educate them, feel confident in their choices, no matter what their choice is. And I just so immersed in all things birth now because I'm also a student midwife. So I am now precepting with a home birth midwife, and I just get to see all kinds of births. Not only have I been able to support births as a doula, but just as a bystander. And it's just such an incredible experience. And I'm just so happy to be on this road to helping other women feel confident in their choices. And I don't feel like there's one right or wrong way to go. Like, no matter what choice feels good to you, that is absolutely the right choice.
Yeah, I support that as well. Thank you for saying that. And you're a parent and you've
Yes.
had your own experiences. I'd love for you to share with us any words of wisdom or experiences that you think could help our listeners about your own fourth trimester experience.
Yeah. So my first, like I said, I was a teen mom. I had no idea what I was doing, and I ended up having that major abdominal surgery. And I just felt so alone. I felt like nobody understood me. I was kind of like dismissed and forgotten about. So, it's really hard to know what you even need if you've never gone through this. You don't have people around you who support you in that way. So I would say definitely do your education on, even if it's Google to start out with, Googling how do I get through this postpartum that I didn't plan. And some things that I suggest is getting some support people on board. And that could be, if you have a partner, get the partner on board, have those open, honest conversations, even if they are super hard to have before you even give birth, because that can help all of you guys be on the same page and not just assume that your partner knows what you need or want, because I know I definitely went through that in my first 3 journeys, and I just assumed he should know what I need and want, but that's just not true. We have to voice what we need or want. And yes, that might absolutely change. And if that change comes up, having those discussions again. And even if you don't have a partner, there are other people that you can kind of lean on, like having a birth or postpartum doula. If you don't have the money for that, that's okay. You can enlist in, let's say, a local church. Reach out to a local church or pregnancy center if you have one in your area. And a lot of times they have meal trains for people who just give birth. And that can be so helpful. Or just having somebody come over and do the dishes or vacuum or watch the baby so you can get a nice hot shower, or you can take a little nap, because sometimes it's just those little things that can help you feel more human, more like yourself, because you're focusing so much on, keeping this little human alive that you can forget about yourself so easily. So I feel like support is number one. And then after that, getting some type of mental help. And not to say everybody's like needs mental help afterwards, but I think having somebody outside of, say, your partner, say your family, that can give you some advice or even just be a listening ear, that's not a part of the immediate situation. Because I feel like even though you felt like your birth was like perfect, sometimes you just need to discuss it with somebody else because, it didn't happen the way exactly you thought it would, or you just feel kind of funky afterwards and you just need to get it out of your body, because all of those emotions that you are feeling, they're actually stored in your cells. And I feel like if you get it out of your body by talking, a lot of times it can start by helping to get that out of your cells. So that is just another thing that I feel like is so important and so underrated, is just talking to somebody.
I couldn't agree more. Jane Honigman from Postpartum Support International was just saying, like, the greatest need that parents have is to talk. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because it can just feel so lonely. And especially if it doesn't even matter if you've had 1 child or 4 children or more. It's a different journey each time. Because I know my first 3, obviously I had cesareans. Obviously it was a big challenge because I was healing from this major abdominal surgery and then expected to take care of this newborn who has lots of needs round the clock. And so I think just being able to talk about that with somebody, it can also potentially bring about tips or things you might not have expected, like other moms saying, "Oh my gosh, me too. Oh my gosh, there's this mom's group. Let's go to the park. Let's take a walk," and that can be so transformational, even just getting outside for like an hour a day, because that sunshine, it just hits differently when you're in the throes of postpartum. I don't know what it is, but it just feels so good.
Yeah, it definitely does. And fighting isolation through social support is definitely recommended. So let's set the scene a little bit, Petra. Let's talk about cesarean rates and VBAC rates. Do you have a sense of like how much this is happening and what the trends are looking like?
Yeah. So right now in the United States, the cesarean rate is about 1/3 of all births. And that is just increasing year after year, unfortunately. And, some of the cesareans, I'm not saying all cesareans are unnecessary, but some cesareans could definitely be avoided. Obviously, if there is like a medical need and you have to have your baby, that is absolutely legitimate. I'm not minimizing that at all, because there is a time and place for it. Like, we have these medical advancements for a reason, because there was an absolute need. But at the rate that they're going right now, and the reasons for cesareans, it's not, unfortunately, always warranted. And it just makes me really sad, because our medical system, the way it's set up, like I mentioned before, these poor doctors, and I feel for them, because you got to think about it. They're human. They have to follow these policies, regulations, these rules, and the hospital system is a business ultimately. And so they have to stick to these rules, policies, regulations, and everything, because they have to stick to time constraints. They have women coming in constantly in labor. If they don't have a bed for them, that's a problem. So I feel like it's such a big problem that we are trying to address, but it takes that little effort, little by little, to get there. And so, yeah, I do feel for these doctors and nurses, because they do have all of this pressure on top of them, not only time constraints and listening to policies and regulations and abiding by them, but also, you got to remember that some of these professionals have some trauma of their own that they're experiencing from previous births that they've been into. Maybe there was a bad outcome, and unfortunately, not all of them get professional help to help them through that. So a lot of times they bring that into subsequent births that they're supporting. And so I think it's really important for somebody who has had a cesarean, or a planned or unplanned cesarean, to just do their research, realize that they do have rights in this matter. They do ultimately have the choice to make. The choice is theirs. But I think it's important for them to have that education, so that they can come from a place of confidence, not from a place of fear, when it comes to deciding which type of birth is going to be right for them. Because I'm not here to say if you've had a cesarean, like, everybody should have a VBAC. I just don't believe that, because if it feels better to you physically or emotionally, psychologically, to have a planned repeat cesarean, I support you 1000%, because you are the one that is ultimately going to live with the decisions of this birth, not your doctor, not your nurses. You are. So that's why I think it's so important to have education and support. Like I said before, talking to your partner and getting them on board, hiring a birth team, and knowing that you do have options. There's not just the hospital birth option. You can also give birth in a birth center, or you can give birth at home, depending on the state or country that you're in, because I know some places it is actually illegal to have a home birth. So I think doing your own research where you live, and just making sure that you are following the right choice for you and your family.
Yeah. So something like 98% of births here in the United States are hospital births. So I'm glad that you mentioned that these other options do exist, because often the default, because it's so common, is to just assume, well, I'm going to have a hospital birth. But there are ways, from what we've had many perinatal professionals say on this program, there are ways to have safe births in other settings for low risk pregnancy types.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the same thing goes for if you do choose an out of hospital birth, is making sure that whoever you do choose aligns with your core beliefs and your values, because even though it is an out of hospital birth, it could still potentially be traumatic if you end up choosing somebody that may not align with your beliefs and values and the way that you want to be treated and talked to, or whatever that is. So I always suggest interviewing multiple providers before actually choosing one. That goes for midwives. That goes for doulas, anybody. So that is like a really important thing that I feel like you should do ahead of time.
Yeah, agreed. So let's talk a little bit about cesarean recovery and what that looks like and some of the tips and tricks that you've learned from your own experiences and through supporting many, many others.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many things because obviously it is hard. Like no matter what anybody says, it is hard because it was a major abdominal surgery. So some tips that I suggest is doing this ahead of time, preparing something like, we see on Instagram or YouTube, those postpartum baskets, like the little wheelie baskets that you can take around from room to room. I highly suggest getting one of those together. And it's like a 3-tier basket on wheels. You can put diapers for your baby and yourself, putting like some nipple cream in there and just whatever else you can think of that would make you feel supported, whether that's snacks or a good book to read. Just something that can help you feel more like yourself, and making sure that you set yourself up in pregnancy to have somebody to help you around the house, whether that's your partner or hiring a postpartum doula. It can be so transformational, like night and day in recovery. If you don't feel like you have the pressure of washing dishes, washing the laundry, making sure everything's vacuumed and mopped while taking care of the baby, if you can just have somebody do that for you, even if you can't afford a postpartum doula, enlisting some family members that can come in and do that once or twice a week. Or, if you don't have family, then like I said before, you can look into a local church, or you can just look into a pregnancy center. There are so many people that are willing to help women postpartum. It is so incredible. Like, I know that it feels like a lot of times we have to do it all by ourselves. Otherwise, we feel like I'm a bad mom. And I'm speaking from my own experience. Like, that's how I felt. I was like, nope, I have to do it all. Like, I'm the mom. I should have to do this. But it's just not true. Back in the day, people literally had a village of people that would come and help them, nurture them and their baby in this postpartum season. So it is not far-fetched to do that now. I know we live in such like a fast-paced society now where, everybody wants everything right now, right now, right now. And we don't have time for that. But just put your little feelers out there and put the word out, and I'm sure somebody would be super happy to help you. So that can be helpful in helping you not feel like you have to do everything. Also, if you don't have that, prepare stuff ahead of time. Prepare some freezer meals. You can have a party of people, invite your friends or neighbors to come have like almost like a cooking party. So you guys all get together and you guys all cook meals together. This can help in 2 ways. It can help you build that sense of community, and it can also help you pack your freezer full of meals before you have your baby. And it's just so much fun to do that, and so beautiful to see people come together and just want to help. So I feel like that is really important. And also with cesareans, realizing that it might take longer to heal than you realized, because the outside might look beautiful and healed within 6 to 8 weeks, but the inside actually takes anywhere from 6 to 12 months to heal completely. So just taking that into account, and also remembering that your placenta also has detached from your uterus. So you have almost comparable to a dinner plate size wound inside of your uterus. So just remembering that your body is healing on so many different levels, and just giving yourself some grace and compassion on this journey, because it is not an easy one, and especially to heal mentally if you weren't planning a cesarean. So also reaching out to somebody that you can talk to, because for me, it took me 16 years before I actually reached out to somebody to talk to about my first cesarean experience. And I didn't realize how much I was holding on to the grief, the loss that I felt from feeling like I was broken because my body didn't do what it was made to do. So those are some really hard and deep feelings to hold on to, and those can play into your day-to-day life It can make you more angry, more snapping at people. And you might not realize where that's coming from. And it could be coming from that. I'm not saying that's the reason every time, but that could be a huge one. I know that was my reason. And now I feel so much lighter. I feel so much lighter that I've gotten that outside of my body and talked to somebody about it that could actually give me some tools and tips to help guide me through that healing journey. And now, I can talk about my cesarean journeys and be grateful for them. Because if it wasn't for those cesareans, I wouldn't be able to help women in the way that I am today, because I understand each journey that they've gone through. Because my first cesarean was an emergency cesarean. My second cesarean was a cesarean because I had a partial placenta previa. My third cesarean was just a planned cesarean because I didn't realize I had options. So, I've had different types of cesarean births. And I also just want to say, if you've had a cesarean, you are not less than a mother because you had a cesarean. You absolutely gave birth. I will never forget somebody told me that I didn't actually give birth because I had cesareans. And that killed me. That just struck such a chord in my heart that just made me feel less than. So I just want to tell you, if you haven't heard this yet, your birth was absolutely you giving birth. And that is absolutely valid. So that really just kills me when people say that. Birth is birth. Cesarean birth is birth.
I mean, there's a lot we discussed just now, from the physical and the preparedness, the practical around it. And then also what you're touching on now is the emotional side of it. We actually had a great episode talking about somatic experiencing and how that can be very supportive for any post-birth processing. But in particular, this practitioner has worked with women who've had cesareans, but still felt like their body needed to complete something. So 100% cesarean is birth, of course. And going through that process, you talked about holding on to emotion and your body still experiencing emotions years later. And it was tied back to that experience. So that could be something we'll link to in the show notes for anyone who's interested in that kind of resource and that kind of therapy. We also have a great episode and resource on how friends and family can help if you don't have access to or can't afford a postpartum doula. A lot of people don't even know what that is, but you do often hear of people like a grandparent or a neighbor or church member, right? Someone saying, "Oh, do you need any help?" And often the case is like, well, of course, but people don't really know how to help or know what to ask for. So that's another resource we'll link to. Hi, listeners. This is a quick thank you for listening and for your ongoing support. If you're enjoying the program, please consider clicking the follow or subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It really helps us out. There's no better way to support us than doing that or sharing the show with a friend, colleague, family member, or any new or expecting parent in your life. It's totally appreciated. On with the show. So let's talk a little bit more about the VBAC and the myths and the facts around that. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions?
So the biggest one that comes up right away is the fear of uterine rupture, which I absolutely get it. It is a real risk. But when you look at the actual numbers of it happening, it is less than 1% after you have had your first primary cesarean. And a lot of people don't know, but you can actually experience a uterine rupture if you've never even had a cesarean. But the number's quite low. I mean, it's like 0.007. But just knowing that that is a real risk. And I also want people to understand that when you do look at this evidence as well on uterine rupture, I want people to look at it with a grain of salt, because all of these studies are done in the hospital for all of this evidence, and they're not actually putting what factors contributed to these outcomes. So what I mean by that is they're not including whether the person had Pitocin, whether that person had an epidural, whether they had misoprostol, which is actually contributing to uterine ruptures. And it is not advised to take that form of induction if you have had a previous cesarean. So there are so many different factors that are involved with this number that of course, if you're an evidence person, I think that's great. Like, this is great evidence. Like, a less than 1% chance of having an actual uterine rupture, I feel like are amazing odds. And this is all hospital births. Just remember, that's all hospital births. There's no numbers yet on home births, but actually the home birth rate of VBAC is closer to like 70 to 90%, when hospital births are anywhere from like 60 to 75%. So the numbers, are different, but I think also just doing what feels best to you. Because, of course, everybody can say, here's the evidence, do what you will with it. But ultimately, it is going to be your choice on what you are okay with, because I also don't want to minimize those people who actually have had a uterine rupture, because that is a real thing for them. They could be that less than 1%. So having, I think, those hard conversations ahead of time, also with like your partner, if you want to talk to your partner about it, and just saying, hey, this is a risk. Let's talk about this. So anyways, that's the biggest risk that people talk about, and the biggest thing that people are afraid of, which I totally understand it. People say that old adage, which is once a cesarean, always a cesarean. And that is absolutely not true, because I also want to tell you where the statement came from. So this was like in the, oh my gosh, it was like the 1700s or 1800s, somewhere in those years. And it was by a doctor who he was performing cesareans. And he had said, once a cesarean, always a cesarean. But in that same article that he wrote that in, he also said, but I have had clients who have had 3 and 4 VBACs after having a cesarean. But we focus on the once a cesarean, always a cesarean phrase. And I just want you to know that it is just not true. I mean, obviously, from my own experience of having 3 cesareans and going on to have a VBAC, but I just always feel like it should always be your choice, no matter what anybody says. And if you're like less than 1% chance, like, I am not okay with that, I'm going to have another cesarean, that's totally fine. But I also invite you to get the risks and benefits of having a repeat cesarean, because there are also risks with having a major abdominal surgery. There's a risk of increased blood loss. There's an increase in infection rates. There's an increase in the fact that obviously you're having a surgery, and there can actually be organ damage to surrounding organs in your body. And then that can require subsequent surgeries to fix that. Lots of people have experienced bladder problems and, just so many other issues. So I think if you have all the information and you want to make that choice, even if you don't have all the information and want to make that choice, that is totally up to you. You are the one that's in charge of this whole journey. So I just think whatever you do is a great choice.
Yeah, thank you. And for someone who's listening and who is interested and hoping for a VBAC, what are some factors that they can potentially increase their chances of having one?
Increase their chances of having a VBAC?
Uh-huh.
So I want to talk about what could lessen your chances first, because there are some things like the type of scar that you actually had. So when you're having a VBAC, the ideal scar is the low transverse bikini scar. If you had an up and down, I'm just going to call it an up and down scar where it was up and down your abdomen, or a J-type scar, then they have reported that there could be increased risk of uterine rupture, just because when you do have the low transverse scar, that means that it was in the lower part of your uterus, and that's not necessarily where the strongest contractions of your uterus happen. So that's why there's an increase in the other scars, because they are higher up on your uterus where the strongest contractions take place. So if you have a low transverse scar, you are a great candidate. But if you have the other types of scars, it is actually also possible to have a VBAC. I have actually talked to multiple women on my own podcast who have had those types of riskier scars. and one in which she actually had a free birth after 2 cesareans with that special scar. And if you don't know what a free birth is, it's when you don't have any providers, you don't have a home birth midwife, you don't have a OB, you were just at home with either like a doula or your partner and just without medical supervision. Obviously, I'm not telling you to do that, but if that's something that you feel like you want to do, that is an option as well. But so that would make you, in the eyes of like a provider, a great candidate. Also, it depends sometimes per provider what type of closure you had on your cesarean. So there would be a single closure and a double closure, and they prefer a double closure because they just feel like that is closing it better. So you can check out your records, your medical records from your cesarean, and it will say on your medical records what type of closure you've had. But it also, like I said, it depends on the provider that you're choosing, because some providers, they don't really look too deep into that. And some are very like anal when it comes to that. You know, it's just whatever your provider's comfortable with. And then, so some focus on like your BMI, having a BMI lower than 30. I don't necessarily think there should be a focus on that because many, many, many women have VBACs that are way over 30 BMI. So I don't think that is a factor. To me, it wouldn't be a factor, but to a lot of people, they say having that BMI in that range makes you a better candidate. And I would say, gosh, there's so many different things, but those are like the main factors where they say like you would be a good candidate. Or if there was like say from birth to birth, the time frame. So anywhere from 18 months to 24 months between births. So if you gave birth, whatever your cesarean date was to your next baby, they want it to be 18 to 24 months so that, they can make sure. And obviously nobody can make sure for sure because they can't, internally see the healing, but it makes them more comfortable to know that there's that time frame between babies so that your internal can heal as best as it can.
Yeah, for sure. And what about picking a provider who's supportive?
Oh, absolutely. That is, I feel like one of the top most important things to do is to make sure that you do pick somebody. Like I said, before, making sure that you interview multiple providers, whether that's an OB office, whether that is a home birth midwife, and interviewing as many as you feel comfortable interviewing without feeling overwhelmed, because it can feel overwhelming sometimes. And, that can dictate where you give birth as well, because obviously if you're seeing an OB office, that would most likely mean a hospital birth. There are unicorn OBs who actually support home birth, but, they're few and far between. Obviously, they do have hospital midwives. So that would mean, hospital birth, and that is a great option too. Or there are the home birth midwives, and you could have the option of having a home birth with them, or if they own a birth center or have access to a birth center, then you can give birth in a birth center. So, you have multiple options, and just remember that each provider comes with different, stipulations. So definitely asking questions on what their policies are for, if they will induce you. Most will not induce VBAC hopefuls, and it just depends on where you are. So asking them if they will induce, if you don't want to be induced, then asking them, are they going to try to make you get induced by 40 weeks? What is their conditions on that? Just making sure that everything that you're concerned about, you get that out there, and make sure that whatever answer they give you aligns with the type of birth that you have. And remember that if you do want a different birth than what you had before, you have to do different things. So you have to ask different questions and possibly choose different types of providers. So, a lot of times we get caught up in outsourcing our decision making. And I feel like that is huge for making sure that we are not just taken along for the ride, and that we are the ones that are being able to actively choose the way that we want our birth to go. And not to say you can choose exactly how it's going to unfold, because we all know birth is on its own timeline, and, different things can happen, and it's we just have to kind of, in that sense, we have to kind of go along for the ride during birth. But leading up to the birth, you can control all of the controllables, I feel like is the best thing that you can do. And everything else, just kind of let it fall into place.
Yeah, definitely. And I would strongly recommend having someone in the room with you to help advocate for you, because when you're in the midst of labor, it's very difficult to sometimes even connect with what's happening around you. So an experienced doula, birth doula, or someone else who has the right experience and credentials to be there to help interpret what's happening around you and speak for you, who knows your wishes, can go a really long way.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the most overlooked aspects of cesarean recovery and how families can prepare for the healing journey that they're about to go on?
I think the overlooked part is just preparing for the postpartum in general, because I remember I prepared so deeply for the birth. During the cesarean, the planned ones, I wanted to have freedom of movement of my arms. I wanted to have a clear drape so I could see my baby be born, immediate skin to skin. But I never thought about the postpartum. I just thought, well, I'll be okay. I've done this before. And yeah, you'll be okay, but you might be struggling internally. So I feel like a lot of the postpartum is overlooked, and just preparing if you have a partner to help you, especially during the night feeds, because it can be so lonely to be up at 2 a.m., struggling to even sit upright in bed because it hurts so bad because you literally just had surgery, and then trying to figure out how to maneuver this baby across your chest while not crying out in pain, to freak out your baby or whatever. So just making sure that you have that nighttime set up ahead of time, having your snacks nearby, having your water nearby, and asking your partner, talking to your partner about what this could look like. Because I think a lot of times we minimize cesareans so much because us as women, sometimes we make it look so easy that they forget themselves that we just had a major abdominal surgery, as well as our hormones are all over the place. And after you have a cesarean, like the first day or so is pretty amazing, mostly because you're still kind of pumped full of drugs. So you're kind of drowsy, your baby's kind of drowsy. And once you get out of that and get home, it's really hard to kind of stay ahead of the pain. And I think it's really important to discuss that ahead of time with, if you don't have a partner, whoever's going to be with you, if you can have somebody there for you at night, because it can also kind of make you go crazy when you're up at 2 a.m. trying to feed, trying not to cry out in pain, trying to make sure that, the baby's latched or your nipples are bleeding, or, whatever it may be. And you just feel like lost and alone and sad because you're thinking about how your birth didn't turn out how you wanted it to, or whatever it may be. So I think for me, it feels like the nighttime was really one of the hardest things. Besides, the daytime was like the cleaning and all that, but the nighttime I felt in solitude because it's dark and it's quiet. And now my thoughts are racing and thinking about every little thing that has led up to that point. And so I think just being open and honest with whoever is supporting you at that time is so important, because sometimes our partners think that we're just being mean, or, they don't understand why we have such an attitude. And sometimes we may not even understand it either. But just asking them to have some grace and compassion and realize that we are going through a huge transition and a huge healing process all at once. So just having those open and honest conversations with them.
Yeah. And the flexibility around it may not go as planned, right? You use that word plan, and you've set expectations a couple of times as it relates to talking with other people around you, with partners, for people who have one, and just generally whoever's there to support you. Mm-hmm. We talk about birth plans as birth intentions because that's really what it is. Like, you're doing your education, you're thinking about what the options are. You may intend it to go a certain way, but actually it may go very differently. So I appreciate you bringing that point up. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground, VBACs, cesarean recovery tips. Any final thoughts or bits of information you want to share with our listeners?
I just really want to drive home to, everybody listening that no matter how your birth unfolds, you still grew a whole entire human. You are still amazing. Even if you feel like you're falling apart, you're amazing. And I am just so proud of you because this is not a journey that anybody can truly prepare you for. Because I can give you all the tips. Everybody can give you all the tips. But ultimately, it might just go a totally different way. And that's okay. I feel like all of us are meant to go on our own journey. And it may not look like all the people we see on Instagram. And that's okay. And no matter what you choose, literally no matter what you choose, whether that's a VBAC, a repeat cesarean, or you end up having an unplanned cesarean, that is okay. You are incredible. And no matter the choice that you make, it is the right choice.
Beautifully put. Petra, where can people find you and find more information about you?
So I am on Instagram, and I would say I'm the most active on there, and it's at Birthing Come True. And then I do have my website, which is also birthingcometrue.com. And then if they want to join my membership, it's called the Journey to VBAC membership. And also I have the podcast, the Journey to VBAC podcast. And, I call it the Journey to VBAC because there's no set way or no set outcome that it should be. It's more so about the journey, not the destination.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the conversation and all the great information. Thanks, Petra.
Thank you.
You can subscribe to this podcast in order to hear more from us. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I hope you'll join us next time on the Fourth Trimester. The theme music on this podcast was created by Sean Trott. Hear more at soundcloud.com/Sean Trott. Special thanks to my true loves, my husband Ben, daughter Penelope, and baby girl Evelyn. Don't forget to share the Fourth Trimester podcast with any new and expecting parents. I'm Sarah Trott. Goodbye for now.
Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I'll sing a song for you. You got your wheels, you got your gears. You ride around town without any fear. You got your pedals, you got your brakes. You always wear your helmet for safety's sake. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing the best that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you.